Welcome, this is A.J.B. I am a psychotherapist in the state of New York, and I specialize in the treatment of panic attacks and agoraphobia. So anything in that wheelhouse I like to work with. And what I want to do today is cover I want to explain to you what the current evidence-based treatment, at least in America, looks like. So I've done this video before. I'm doing it again because it was too long and I'm trying to shorten it, and also I was tripping over my own words as I was talking. This was my first video in a while, and I have a tendency to do that. I have to remind myself to think before I speak, basically. So this time I'm redoing this, and I'm going to be thinking before I speak. This is based on the Clinical Handbook of Psychological Disorders, a step-by-step treatment manual. The author is David H. Barlow, Dr. Barlow. He is a prominent figure, an expert, at least in the United States, on panic disorders and agoraphobia. So let's jump to the treatment manual for panic disorder and agoraphobia right now. Okay, here we are. So I just want to point out to you that here we go. Michelle Craske. Whoops, I did not mean to cover her name. I wish I could make this thinner. So Michelle Craske and Dr. Michelle Craske and Dr. David Barlow. These are the U.S. experts on panic disorder and agoraphobia research. They've been at this for a long time. So if you look at research, you'll see their names popping up way back into, actually, I'm not going to say how long, but I want to say at least 1980, if not longer. I hope I'm not wrong on that, but they've been in this world for a long time is the point I'm trying to get at. So what I'm going to do here is, I'm not going to cover this whole thing because this is like very, very long. I'm just going to give you a condensed version of the treatment. Okay, so let's jump into that right now. Here we go. So there is a lot to be said about this. As I was scrolling through the text to get here, I realized, wow, there's so much to cover. So I might make more videos breaking this stuff down into smaller digestible chunks. But yeah, I have this ADHD-like tendency to go all over the place. So I'm going to try to stay focused on just the treatment modality. Okay, so here we go. The first step to treating in the evidence-based model, to treating panic disorder or agoraphobia, is education. This is super duper important. The main reason, at least as I see it, as a provider of this kind of treatment, the main reason for the education, why it's so important, without this, we're not going anywhere, is buy-in. Buy-in. Whoa, I forgot an I. I need the buy-in. You need to buy in. You don't necessarily have to be fully convinced, but at the very least, you have to be willing to entertain the possibility that your panic attacks, that your agoraphobia is not produced by some mysterious illness, just by some mysterious illness. That's a commonality across everybody that has a panic disorder or agoraphobia. I'm gonna say we all think at one point or another that this is cancer, this is budding aneurysm, this is some asthmatic something or other, or that this is just some condition that has somehow manifested in us and doesn't manifest in everybody else. And we are the exception. So there's a tendency to think like that. And if we can't let go of that, we won't get anywhere with treatment. That's been my experience. And so this is why the education component is so important. And so we'll spend a lot of time explaining to you the physiology. How does this work? Why is it that it seems like I'm not really breathing faster, yet I feel like I'm or that I feel like I'm breathing faster, but that I feel like I'm still out of breath, or the other way around. I feel like I'm not breathing any faster, but I feel like I am hyperventilating. What's up with that? There's physiological explanations for everything. Why do my fingertips tingle? Why does it feel like I'm having a heart attack? Why does it feel like I'm suffering? Why does it feel like I'm going to lose my mind? Why does it feel like I'm maybe not here? Like I get disconnected from the present moment. Getting a better understanding of everything, an alternative explanation of why everything occurs, and also, just as importantly, is how does my panic disorder function? So whether you have a panic disorder or agoraphobia, panic attacks are part of the picture. And understanding the mechanism by which they are maintained is very important, because you'll be asked to be self-monitoring. You'll be asked to, we're trying to make you your own scientist. We're trying to encourage you to maintain this curious, even though this stuff is scary, we're trying to encourage you to maintain a sense of scientific curiosity about what is happening to you. So one thing that I want to drill into your head right now is this image. This image. This is the panic cycle. Very simple stuff. Fear, and then fear of symptoms. I'm sorry. Symptoms of fear. Okay? It's not really legible, but you know what I said there, right? So this is your panic cycle. This is, you are afraid of your symptoms of fear, or of the symptoms that you experience that are a natural byproduct of fear. And whenever you experience symptoms of fear, you react with more fear. There's more that can be said about that. There's also, you can also define it, you can also consider your level of anticipation. And so here is anticipation, anxiety. Oops, I am dyslexic today. Anticipation, anxiety, right? So when you're super calm, you're at 0. When you're having a full-blown panic attack, if you're experiencing the peak experience of a panic attack, you are at 100. And so as this cycle rotates, as this spins in circles, you are rising higher and higher and higher in anticipation, anxiety. Why is that? Because as your symptoms intensify, I'm making a mess out of my picture here. As your symptoms intensify, you are either consciously or unconsciously becoming aware that you're closer and closer to the danger. Okay? The metaphor that seems to at least speaks to me the most about getting closer to that full-blown panic attack, that growing anticipation anxiety, is of a guy with a knife. So there's a guy, let's say a mugger, and you see him from far away. And so while you're seeing him from far away, you're like not sure. Is he coming for me? What does he want? What's he doing with a knife? You're not sure, but your anticipation anxiety is starting to rise. It's no longer 0, right? So you're somewhere here when you see the guy from far away. But then he starts moving towards you. He starts walking briskly, let's say, towards you with that knife, and anticipation is rising. What's going to happen? Now imagine he walks all the way up to you. He's right next to you, and not only that, you see him pull back with the knife hand, and he starts going towards you, right? So the knife is now flying. Slow down that split-second moment in your mind. Imagine that. So what would normally, if you see somebody strike with a knife, right? It's very quick. Boom, less than a second, right? Slow that down. Imagine that moment. It's that moment where you see the knife already flying towards you, you see it going towards your body, and you know that you are not quick enough at this point anymore, because the movement takes a split second, to get out of its way. It's that moment where you know you're about to get hit with that knife, and there's not much you can do. That moment is here, and you can't get away. This is your 100%. It's that white, cold moment of fear that you might imagine experiencing in the moment where you're convinced that a disaster is happening imminently, right here, right now. I'm in it. Okay, so that's it. There's another way you can conceptualize panic, and I'm repeating this a lot because it's very important. If you're struggling with panic attacks, you got to understand how it is maintained. And by the way, this stuff can happen very quickly. It might seem like it's just blows up immediately into full blown. This cycle still occurs, very likely this cycle still occurs, but I'll explain what else might be happening right now with another conceptualization. I'm going to conceptualize these two things, the anticipation anxiety scale and the cycle, in one symbol. So here, let me just move my face. Zoop. Here. A spiral is another way of conceptualizing it. A spiral. Okay? See how it's growing to the top? So you see it, so the spiral nature is the fear cycle, right? That's the spiral nature is the cycle. It represents, I'm just gonna redraw it, right? And the rising nature, the fact that it's a spiral, that's the anticipation anxiety. Okay? So that's another way of conceptualizing it. So sometimes, why is it that sometimes these panic attacks can just blow up very rapidly? Because sometimes some of the symptoms that we experience, they might be more intense, for example, or they might be more strongly associated with the experience of panic. And so sometimes you can go from you're here at zero, right? You're just chilling, and then you experience something that is highly associated with panic, and you actually start the cycle somewhere up here, right? That's why sometimes you can be quick, but typically, as far as I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, we never start up here. All right, I'm gonna go out on a limb. So as you're working on your own panic, I strongly urge you to be very mindful and again, be a scientist, explore this stuff, and notice that you never really start up here. It's at most you start somewhere up here, but you'll still do a couple loops before you get to the tippity top. All right, so that's the one part. That's not all the education that you'll get, but it is I would say one of the more important pieces of education that you will get. Okay, so let's move on to the next. So here I already mentioned this. You are your own scientist. We want you to be constantly assessing be curious about what you're experiencing. Try to understand, test what I just shared with you. Test that spiral theory, test the loop theory, test the anticipation anxiety theory. See if you can spot it. It's there. I guarantee you. But yeah, that's the very important component. Moving on to the next. That's actually right here. There we are. Breathing retraining, respiratory training. So quickly give you an overview. This was for a long while, when we first started looking. When mental health providers, when scientists started first looking at how do we best tackle this panic problem, they figured that breathing retraining would make sense. I don't know the history of how it developed, but I can easily imagine how scientists reached the conclusion that, breathing retraining makes sense. And the reason I suspect was that a lot of people, when they come with panic attacks to me, they are convinced that there's something wrong with their breathing, and they're trying to control their breathing, they're trying to fix their breathing. And so scientists figured that maybe that's what's going on. What it turns out is that this is not the way, and so hopefully nobody uses this anymore, for the most part, with some minor exceptions. This is not really the way. It doesn't really work, and sometimes it's even been shown to be counterproductive. So moving on to the next step, we got applied relaxation. Okay, so applied relaxation. It's just relaxation. It's a form of relaxation. So we got a handful of different relaxation exercises. In my clinical experience, applied relaxation, you can't relax a panic attack. A panic attack is just too intense. I mean, I'm not gonna say you can't. You may have some success, but it's going to be like 1 out of 5 times at most, maybe 1 out of 10 times, sometimes never. Panic attacks tend to be too intense. And so it's not, in my view, it's still not as a good avenue to take. I would put it in a similar category to breathing retraining. I consider applied relaxation and breathing retraining as just something to rest your mind on as you're experiencing anxiety and panic. It is not meant as a way to get rid of the problem, okay? So let's keep going. So hopefully this will all get tied in as we move, because I believe I'm going to be talking about exposure in a second. So here we are. I actually don't have to scroll the page. Cognitive restructuring. So cognitive restructuring, the shortest way I can explain it is helping you see that the conclusions you've drawn about what's happening with your body during a panic attack is not correct, and helping you develop alternative explanations for what you're experiencing. So that's the traditional CBT. When I think CBT, and I'm guessing other people think the same way, they see it the same way, most people. But when we think CBT, we think changing our minds, right? So CBT in its simplest form is represented by the ABC model. A is the antecedent. B is the belief, and C is the consequence, okay? So CBT says that this is the motto. If you want to memorize what CBT is all about, the motto of CBT is change the belief, change the consequence. So let's write that. Change the belief, comma, change the consequence. So when we look at your problems through the lens of CBT, we look for, first we try to identify, well, it doesn't have to be done in this order, it can be done in any order, but we look for your antecedents, that's your trigger. Then typically what we will first identify is your trigger and the consequence. So you'll be telling us a story, therapists, you'll be telling a story like, I went to work and I spoke to my boss and then I got so stressed out I couldn't calm down. Okay, so you just told me your antecedent, your trigger, your boss, probably some conversation, maybe we can get even more specific about what that is, and then you told me your consequence. I got so stressed out. But now we got to identify your belief. Well, what was the belief about what was happening that led you to this reaction? Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. And there's different ways of going about changing the belief. Many different ways. My go-to favorite thing is Socratic questioning. I don't know why I blanked on that. Socratic questioning. Socratic questioning is you ask yourself, or I help you by asking you questions motivated by a sense of curiosity, not by an agenda, right? Because if I'm asking you these questions, or if you're asking yourself these questions from a place of an agenda, meaning I'm going to change my belief. I got to change my belief, and I'm going to ask myself questions to change my belief. Then you're not quite doing Socratic questioning. Let me pause my notification. Well, that person is no longer anonymous. Anyways, so where was I? All right. So you can't have an agenda in Socratic questioning. I'm now realizing I'm making this long again by going really in depth. Well, I guess I can't be short-winded. So I think I communicated the concept of Socratic questioning, right? The reason why you don't want to be biased is because Socratic questioning isn't about intentionally changing your mind about something, but it's more as a consequence. Because the main goal, the change in belief is more as a consequence. Because the main goal of Socratic questioning is to get to the truth or the source of what you believe to be the truth. Because a lot of times when we assess where did this belief come from, how did I develop it, on what other evidence am I supporting this belief, when we look at it more closely, we oftentimes find out that our beliefs are grounded in something cloudy. I was gonna say, I'm imagining clouds, something that you can't grab onto. There's a word for this in English, but I'm forgetting the word. They're not grounded in anything. They came from some maybe fear that I just cooked up one day, and I can't quite connect it to anything that would rationally lead me to truly maintain that belief, to justify having that belief, right? So that's why it's one of my favorite methods, because it's not so much about lying to ourselves, it's about getting closer to the truth, right? So if, for example, it leaves the door open for the possibility that maybe the things you fear are in fact grounded in truth. I shouldn't, as a therapist, I should never close that door, because, for example, let's just say you come to me and this is just a wild example. Let's just say you come to me and you say to me that I think I'm either dealing with paranoia or I'm being followed. And I just start convincing you, no, you're not being followed, right? You see where I'm going with this? And then it turns out that you are actually being followed. Well, I just put you in danger. So that's why I like Socratic questioning. So anyways, there's other ways. There's a cognitive distortion identification. That's just becoming more aware, memorizing different ways that we reach erroneous conclusions, and memorizing them and identifying them as they're occurring, so that you can more easily dismiss certain ideas. There's also we can also do adaptive responses, which involves creating alternative explanations for what is happening. And I believe that there's other ways to skin the cat, but you get the point. Let's keep going. Here we are. Good old exposure. So without this, we ain't going nowhere. Okay, this is very important. There's two types of different exposures: interoceptive and in vivo. In vivo is going to be more pertinent towards agoraphobia, and interoceptive is going to be more pertinent towards panic disorder, although both interoceptive will also be pertinent to agoraphobia, because agoraphobia is the problem of agoraphobia is connected to the fear of panic attacks, and interoceptive exposure addresses the specific fears associated with the specific associations, fears associated with panic attacks. Meanwhile, in vivo exposure it addresses the fears associated with specific situations and places. So why is exposure important? Because it's not enough to just understand cognitively that what we think might not be what we think is happening, right? So it might not be enough to just convince ourselves that, yeah, I'm not really having heart attacks, I am just having panic attacks. And by the way, odds of you being 100% certain just from CBT, just from cognitive restructuring, that you're not actually having heart attacks are slim to none. If that was enough, then, I mean, I've just never seen it. My goal typically when I'm doing cognitive restructuring with people that I'm working with my patients, is to at least cast doubt on the previous interpretations of the situation. So to cast doubt on this thought that I'm having a heart attack, or that I'm suffocating, or that I'm going crazy. Because it's just very difficult to go all the way to zero. Like, nah, that's not what's happening. Instead, what we need is to help you see it in practice, right? That's what exposure is all about. Exposure is, you can think of exposure as once we understand that this is probably not a heart attack, this fatal thing that I'm fearing happening is probably not gonna happen. I can see it logically, but now I gotta put it to the test. You can think of yourself as being composed of two parts. Part one is that brainy part. It thinks a lot, and it can understand things rationally. But then there's this second part, you can maybe compare it to your heart. The heart knows, right? Well, the heart knows what it has experienced, and there's really no other way to change the heart's mind. So there's the heart and the mind. The mind understands and can change its mind quickly. The heart takes a while to change, because it learns only one way. It learns through experience. And so that's why we use exposure. We use exposure to help the heart catch up and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I heard you, mind. I heard you saying to me that this and that is not true, but I couldn't believe it until I experienced it myself, and now I see it. Okay, so you know what? Maybe I won't fire up this fight or flight, this huge fight or flight as I was previously, because I guess I don't need it. So I already explained in vivo exposure. That's exposure to specific situations and places. So let's just say you're afraid of the subway. You're terrified of going down the subway, and let's just say these are the subway stairs. All right, these are subway stairs, and there's a street here, right? And there's a sidewalk. No, sidewalk is here then. Yes, sidewalk is here. Okay, there's a light, and so you'll be standing here at first. Well, I gave you 4 arms. Okay. All right. Well, you got 4 arms, and you'll be standing on this side of the street. And so step 1 of in vivo exposure might be you standing across the street, just looking at the entrance to the subway. And here I'm going to draw a train. Choo-choo train. Does that look like a train? Yeah, good enough. And so this will be step 1. So let me show you how we plan that out. We do that through exposure hierarchies. We build an exposure hierarchy. So there you go. This is step one. You standing across the street. Step 0, whatever. And then step 1 will be you crossing the street. So now you're here. Okay. We performed surgery and we removed the extra arms. So now you have 2 arms, as you should. And that'll be step 1. Step 2 would be maybe on the first step of the subway. All right. And so on and so forth, and until you get to the tippity top, whatever that number is, and you're happily on the subway. Okay, so that's the concept here. Now let me explain interoceptive exposure. It's the same stuff, but a little bit different. So in interoceptive exposure, on your body, let me try to draw a human. Arm, torso, arm, head, leg. Okay. On your body, you have all kinds of symptoms. So if you have cardiac, I think I'm explaining in the other video, there's 3 categories of panic attacks: cardiac, respiratory, and derealized, I think. I'm never sure how to say it. Derealized or derealization? Derealized. So cardiac, that's like heart attacks. Respiratory, suffocation. Derealized, going crazy. The fastest way I can explain this. So cardiac symptoms are typically located here somewhere, right? Your chest area. Sometimes people feel aches going down their arm because they have read that a shooting pain down the arm is associated with heart attacks. Respiratory, usually somewhere in the neck, in the throat. They feel like it's difficulty breathing. Oh yeah, and also feeling one's own pulse would belong in cardiac. So what we're gonna try to do is same thing as before. We're gonna have a exposure hierarchy, and we're gonna try to trigger these symptoms in smaller ways, in smaller and smaller ways. So for cardiac, the best example is we'll have you jump in place. Doing jump. I was gonna draw jumping jacks, but I don't know how to draw that. You'll jump in place to raise your heart rate. That might be enough to trigger your fear of the panic attack, and that's how we. Same idea. We wait. As in vivo, we will now be waiting for your anxiety to go down before moving on to the next step. And then the next step might be, if it's cardiac, we might have you run in place for a longer period of time, or maybe we'll come up with something else. For respiratory, you might be breathing through a straw to emulate this sensation of difficulty breathing. And we can maybe control the intensity of it by either by the thickness of the straw or by the length that you breathe through the straw for. And you do it longer and longer and longer, or you use smaller and smaller and smaller straws. And then derealized, one thing we could do is have you hyperventilate on purpose. That can actually trigger respiratory and derealized. Or we can maybe have you spin. Sometimes people feel fear fainting. That kind of falls under the category of derealized. So that's the idea, right? So we will vary the intensity of the exposure as you go up this hierarchy. So that's it now, but there's one more thing I gotta show you. Here we are, this right here. Okay, so check out the other video that I did on the novel approaches to therapy. This is an emerging method of treating panic disorder and agoraphobia. In my view, in my experience, it is way better than the use of applied relaxation or breathing retraining. Because so now there's really 3 things you could do. There's more, but all of the other methods fall under the same category as BR and AR. AR and BR are not the same as ACT, but they are replaceable. Okay, so let me explain a little bit more about what I mean by that. So ACT, okay, I didn't say. ACT is a form of acceptance. It's a acceptance and commitment therapy. Okay, so now let me explain to you how AR and BR is typically used, or ACT. So remember the exposure hierarchy we had? All right, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so we have this. It's like a 6. Okay, so we have that. As you're exposing yourself on 1, or on 0, or on 1, or on 2, you'll be applying AR, BR, or ACT. Okay, that's what they are. They are. You can think of them as things to rest your mind on as the exposure is taking place. The issue with AR and BR and meditation, you could put in meditation here, meditation, whatever. Or there's a handful of other things that you could put in here. In my experience, they serve as nothing more as just something for you to rest your mind on, rest your attention on. They're like a semi-distraction, okay? Now, ACT is very different. It's also something that you can rest your mind on. It gives you something to do while you're experiencing the uncomfortable thing as you're going through exposure. But it also serves another purpose. It is practicing your willingness to experience the undesirable, the inexperienceable, the thing you don't want to experience. Okay, so remember I mentioned the anticipation anxiety. Anticipation. The amount of anticipation you feel, the amount of anticipation anxiety that you feel is directly proportional to how much you're resisting the thing that lies at 100% at this end of the continuum, right? ACT focuses on making you more willing, more open, less resistant to, less controlling of your inner experience. And it has a bunch of different ways of getting, of trying to help you get there. Check out the other video. It's something, I think it's like novel approaches to panic disorder. I think something like that. That's the title of the video. So we are basically decreasing the intensity of this anticipation anxiety. You can think of it as perhaps maybe like a way of blocking your anticipation anxiety of rising, right? Or maybe shortening the length of this continuum. So that's why this is way more effective than this. ACT is way more effective than ARBR because it serves two purposes and they are synergistic. So those are your ways of this. These are the evidence-based treatments for panic disorder and agoraphobia. Hope this was helpful. See you in the next video.